We finally get to talk about something positive, something good, something that makes me legitimately smile. No, we're not talking about the quarterback situation today. We're not talking about that entire Dookie offense. We're throwing that all to the side, and we're going to talk about something that made me happy all year, the defense. Oh, man, this defense. I got a lot to say about this defense. Going to give Joe Woods a grade. So let's just kind of jump into it, man. Let's do this report card for Joe Woods. One, I'm just going to be real with y'all. It's been, I don't want to say doom and gloom because it's definitely not doom and gloom. The Browns aren't in a doom and gloom situation. But it's been an interesting vibe talking about the Browns the last few weeks. But this week, or at least today, is a much different vibe. It's going to be all positive vibes here because we're talking about the defense, and the defense was so good this year. It really was. Look, it started a little slow at the beginning of the year. They had the 2 bad games versus Arizona, with 3 bad games versus Arizona, the Chargers, where they refused to cover Mike Williams, and the Patriots game, right? Those 3 games alone will keep them from being eligible for an A+, right? If you give up 40 points 3 times, you can't be an A+ defense. But I'm willing to give some leniency there with the modern NFL, knowing that it's kind of geared to score points. You know, that stuff does kind of happen even with the great defenses nowadays. And honestly, when I look back at the defense and the job that Joe Woods has done over 2 years, I have to say that in retrospect, hindsight being 2020, when I look at, ironically, 2020, I think he did an excellent job both these years. Now, last year, he got kind of a shorthand there with the talent. You know, he was out there with Andrew Sadejo. Denzel Ward got hurt for a period of time. Like, the defense had a ton of injuries. They weren't super deep in the secondary to begin with, and then it got worse and worse as the season went on. I mean, at some point, we were starting Robert Jackson, and it was bad, right? But I have to give Joe Woods his credit in retrospect. We saw how bad the offense got this year and how much the offense just flat out tanked this team's success this year, right? Like, just straight up tanked this team's success. And that was with Nick Chubb for most, well, not for most of the year. Well, yeah, for most of the year. And then with Kareem Hunt, you know, for parts of the year. You had your starting quarterback for about 16 of those games. Ironically, the 2 that you didn't have him, you won. And all of that kind of came in, right? The offense wasn't as bad health-wise or personnel-wise as the defense was last year. And in spite of that, the defense really didn't tank the year like the offense did. Yeah, did it come up in the divisional round last year? Absolutely, right? Being able to play the Chiefs, you know, getting that one last stop, it definitely came up as a factor, but it wasn't the deciding factor, right? It wasn't like the defense was completely awful in that game against the Chiefs. I mean, the Chiefs didn't score like 40 points in that game. I believe that was an under 30-point game there. So even then, when you look back at the job that the defense did with the shorthands that they had last year, I think you look at it much more favorably, knowing how badly this offense tanked this team's success last year or this year, right? So I'm going to be pretty positive about Joe Woods, given that I feel like he's done a pretty good job the last 2 years, and especially when you look at what he had. This year, when he was given the proper pieces, you know, a proper running mate with Myles Garrett and Garrett and Clowney, you know, a really good linebacker in JOK. He got his young safeties back, and added another safety in John Johnson, and then really got health in that secondary for the entire year. And this was one of the best defenses in football. If you look at PFF says this is the 5th best defense in football, the number 1 coverage defense in football. And remember, Joe Woods is a defensive back coach, so that's his specialty. It's nice to see his specialty shine through. And this team was 8th in pass rushing. That is a great defense, right? When you're good at all 3 of those phases of the game, that's a really, really good defense. At times, I feel like we get caught in the weeds when we're criticizing Joe Woods because we're criticizing how he gets to this point. We're criticizing, you know, oh, if he drops in the zone too much, or, you know, if he's not aggressive enough. but the numbers do speak for itself. The fact of the matter is that I can point to like 5 games at the very least where this defense was the instrumental main driving force on why this team won. I don't know if there's a single game this year where the offense was just like carrying the team and won this year, right? Like that's how bad the situation was on the other side of the ball. There were times where the offense refused to put games away and the defense just had to keep working, right? The Minnesota game where the Browns just really needed to score 1 touchdown to put the game away. Browns refused to do that offensively. Defense still got the job done, right? You look at the Detroit game, same situation there where the Browns defense just had to keep it together because the offense just flat out refused to do anything. And you look at a game like the Halloween game versus the Steelers where the Browns offense just didn't show up even though the defense did. You could look at the Las Vegas game where, offense, I'll give them a break there, right? They were down a lot of players offensively, but so were they defensively. Still showed up, played very well. The first Baltimore game is another one. Got 4 interceptions. Offense couldn't get more than 16 points, right? There are a lot of performances, right? The defense would have allowed, I think, this year, if you got just standard offensive play this year from the offense. That's why I gave Kevin Stefanski a D+, because his offense was putrid this year. I think if you just get a normal offensive output from this team, you get 10 wins out of this team and you make the playoffs, right? If the offense didn't tank the entire year, you would have probably made the playoffs because, again, I just, off the top of my head, I pointed out like 3 games where the offense just refused to win or do anything to help the defense, right? So, given those circumstances, I know the record's not great, and this isn't a record where you're like, hey, I want to throw a bunch of A+ around. But when you look at the circumstances that the defense fought throughout this year, I think they should get an A+. I mean, they had injuries in certain areas. They had COVID issues as well, and they still maintained a high level of play. Now, let's talk about some of that depth there. Let's talk about the development of the secondary. I think they did a great job. I think they did an excellent job. I think we got one of the best Denzel Ward years that we have gotten in Cleveland. I think we got pretty good Greedy Williams. He has his flaws, but, he's pretty good there. Greg Newsome, feel like he's going to be excellent. The development of Greg Newsome throughout the year, I'm very impressed with, thoroughly impressed with Greg Newsome, to the point to where it might make Denzel Ward a little bit expendable because Greg looks like he's a number 1 corner already. You know what I mean? Like, he looks pretty good at this point. Grant Delpit, who this is technically kind of his rookie year because he didn't play last year, I thought he had put in some strong work in this first season for him, right? It could have been better, but I felt like the development was on the right path with him. A.J. Green III is an undrafted rookie from last year. Well, not a rookie anymore, second-year player now. But I think the development on him has been great. MJ Stewart's a former second-round pick from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, came on the Browns in free agency a couple of years ago. And the development of MJ Stewart's been great, man. MJ Stewart has a real role on this team as a special teams ace and is a pretty good option there at nickel if you want, right? And like, he's not going to be the greatest coverage guy in the world, but he's such a good tackler, it almost doesn't matter when he's in that nickel role because he can just tackle guys before they can get that first down, which was what he did a great job with, especially against Green Bay. By the way, Green Bay, another game where the offense, if they would have just had a regular game offensively, Browns would have won. So add that to 11 wins that the Browns probably should have had this year if they would have just gotten average offensive play, right? That's how good this defense was. It didn't carry you to 11 wins, but it most certainly dragged this team to 8 wins. And that's saying something, given that some of the offensive outputs this year were just atrocious for an offense that shouldn't have been that bad. Now, I also want to talk about my favorite part. Well, not my favorite part. One of my favorite parts about this defense. The use of Clowney and Myles Garrett, man. I took so much joy in finally seeing this personal dream of mine come to fruition and be as good as I thought it could be, right? If you watch me for any amount of time, I've been begging. Clowney needs to come to Cleveland. Clowney needs to play with Myles. That's a match made in heaven. I've been begging for this. But I hope it lasts for more than 1 year. I really do. But what we got this year was fantastic. They combined for 25 sacks. I don't know what my expectation was. I think it was at like around 20 for both of them. So I think that even exceeded my high expectations of this unit. I loved how they used these guys in tandem, how they would put them next to each other, how they would put them both inside sometimes. Also, an underrated note, man, Tag McKinley was coming on strong at the last part of the season before he tore his Achilles. So I think the development of him went a long way. They had a couple of guys that they were developing that I think are kind of working out. And Denebo is one of those guys that I feel like, he's going to have a role sooner than later because he put in some good work there as a third or fourth edge component. But that pass rush, man, thumbs up. Need to bring it back. Love it. Love the depth there. Love the development there. And I love the development of one JOK. Now, I don't know how much credit Joe Woods can take with JOK because I think JOK is just one of those players that was going to be great wherever he went, right? Like y'all know, if you covered me, if you watched me while I was covering the draft last year, huge JOK fan, huge JOK supporter. I thought JOK should have been the best linebacker. Now, I was down on Micah Parsons, which ended up being wrong, right? Like Micah Parsons is much better than I ever thought he would be. But as a traditional stand-up linebacker, I still think that JOK is going to be the best out that class. I think Micah's going to be probably the best hybrid guy, but JOK, he's going to be the best kind of traditional stand-up linebacker. He has the instincts. He's not a big dude, right? And he wears 28, which makes him look even smaller than he actually is. But he's big enough at, 6'1", 230, and he's strong enough and smart enough and finesse enough with his angles where I don't think it's going to be a big issue, right? There was a couple of times where they pulled guards on him in the run game, and he was able to slip past them. He was able to get past tight ends when he was able to kind of control where his body was going to be. I think this dude's smart enough to know how to play his angles, get his leverage, and then get in the backfield, and he'll develop that even more as time goes on. I think his size is going to become less and less of a factor. He showed really early signs of being really great at the things that help you compensate for a lack of size for a linebacker this year. And I think the ceiling is incredible with JOK. And honestly, the ceiling for this defense, when you have a Grant Delpit, when you have a JOK, when you have a Myles Garrett, when you have a Denzel Ward, when you have a Greg Newsome, when you have all of these really talented players that, the ceiling is super high on, it elevates the play of everybody around him. I think we saw that with Jacob Phillips at the end of the year when he got some play. I felt like he played really well. I even think we got some better play as a special teamers from Mac Wilson this year. I think Sione Takitaki is a solid linebacker, and I think you should probably bring back Malcolm Smith, and you're probably set there at linebacking. Look, the problems with this Browns team are almost exclusively on special teams and offense. I can't say a single thing about this defense that wasn't playoff ready or championship contending ready this year, especially by the end of the year. This was a tremendous defense. It was a tremendous job by Joe Woods. He got a ton of flack throughout his first 2 years here, but I think he's been the most solid out of any court of the coaching staff coordinators on this roster. If you look at what he was dealt his first year and what he got this year and what he did with this year, there's no doubt in my mind that he's been one of the more solid pieces in this coaching staff. So I think Joe Woods deserves his respect, deserves his love, deserves all the flowers that he's been given right now. I hope he can follow up year 3 with a even better defense than what he had this year, and hopefully the offense can contribute something like that to him, because if they can here's the truth, man. I know when we're watching these playoffs, right, we think the Browns are so far away because we're only remembering how putrid the offense was, to be honest with you, right? We're only remembering that. If the Browns can figure out a way to get that offense back on track, whichever way that is, right? If that's a trade for Russell Wilson, if that's a trade for another quarterback, or if it's Baker Mayfield just having a fantastic year next year, right? If the Browns can find a way to get consistent, solid offensive play, Browns are going to be a contender again. That's just what it is, right? That's the question. I know a lot of people are down on this offense and down on this team. Oh, they're not, a quarterback away. I think they are. I think they really are, because this defense was so good. I think they're going to get better if they can bring back some key names next year. They can improve this defense even further. And offensively, look, I know we have issues at wide receiver. We don't love the tight end situation. We have questions at quarterback. But a better quarterback play from whoever it comes from, whoever you want it to come from. If you get better quarterback play, it kind of solves a lot of those issues going forward, right? The Bengals are a team that had a ton of holes coming into this season, and all of a sudden better quarterback play erased a lot of them holes. Right now they're in the AFC Championship. So that's really where this Browns team is, right? If you need a reason to think that the future is bright with the Cleveland Browns, look at the names on the defense, look at the performances that you got this year from the defense, and know that it can get even better than it did this year. And that's where all the optimism comes for next year, given that, hey, if this offense just gives us normal football next year, they're going to at least be in the playoffs. But that's my thoughts on Joe Woods. Obviously, I'm giving Joe Woods an A. Can't give him an A+ because of those 3 games I mentioned before, but I'm going to give him an A. I think he did an excellent job. And I want to know what you guys think of Joe Woods' job here in 2021. How well did Joe Woods do in your eyes? What grade would you give him? But again, guys, thank you for watching. I want you guys to have a great day. Have a good night.